When I say comic book film adaptations, what comes to mind? Beyond seeing Red, I'm guessing most of you thought of blockbusters with huge budgets dripping with CGI. Maybe there were thoughts of minimal narrative and maximum spectacle, alongside some troubling issues of gender and race representation. What if comic books were an opportunity for the expansion of cinematic language in the digital age? Not sold? Let's see if we can help you see our point of view. Comic book adaptations are predominantly products of the digital age. In earlier films, practical effects and non-digital special effects were used to recreate the spectacle of the source material. Matte paintings, rear projection, models and animation were used in comic book serials from the 1940s, and then blue screen techniques were used as well in later productions. These days, the entire range of digital techniques are used to complete the transformation from page to screen. Larger-than-life characters who undergo fantastic transformations are now played by the same actor.
That's my secret, Cap. I'm always angry.
Stories where the fate of the Earth is in balance are now able to be presented, and the superpowers that superheroes are known for can be seen and marvelled at. The extraordinary visuals that these films contain are often bemoaned by critics, who argue that the narrative is now completely forgotten in exchange for visual spectacle. In the age of practical special effects, visuals were time-consuming and costly, meaning they were reserved for special moments. In his analysis of blockbuster films, King describes spectacle as the production of images at which we might wish to stop and stare. Now that digital technology has advanced as far as it has and become cheaper along the way, every image can be spectacular. Some critics have put spectacle and narrative at opposite ends of a line, but Lewis reconstructs the argument in terms of transmission of information. With this new construction, Lewis argues that transmission comes in two forms, narrational and non-narrational transmission, and argues that in some cases, narrative does not in fact stop for spectacle to take place. In this way, both spectacle and narrative are intertwined in the transmission of information to the audience. If we look at film as the transmission of information to the spectator, then comic book adaptations are providing opportunities to expand the form in which this transmission of information takes place. No, really. Hear us out. Colour correction using a digital intermediate has taken the place of film tinting and other film processing techniques such as bleach bypass, which was used in Saving Private Ryan to produce a gritty, desaturated look. In the digital process, film is scanned into a computer where individual elements are able to be manipulated to produce the required effect. The first feature film to be completely scanned and digitally colour corrected was the Coen brothers film Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?, released in the year 2000. Director of photography Roger Deakins was able to achieve a look for the film that emulated the time in which the film was set. Even though the film was shot in the middle of summer and the fields and forests in which they shot were lush and green, after colour correction, the end result was a mix of yellows and browns which matched the setting of the Dust Bowl Deep South during the 1930s. This technique has since been taken to its limits by comic book adaptations. Sin City uses specifically selected colour to add a layer of meaning to the image. The director, Robert Rodriguez, has utilised the potential of the digital intermediate in order to create a language of colour that informs the audience as to whose story is being told, while also enabling a closer emotional connection to the scene. The opening scene, shown here, demonstrates the digital intermediate strengths and in the context of the film serves as an introduction to the stylised aesthetic form. A lounge jazz soundtrack and low-key lighting reminiscent of film noir immediately spark genre conventions in the audience and create a mood. The red dress of an unknown woman adds a dynamic element to the image. The director is guiding the audience's eye within the frame, showing us what to look at. The woman's lips and dress are highlighted in red, maybe denoting passion, love, or at least lust.
It's not just your face, your figure, or your voice. It's your eyes. All the things I see in your eyes.
This shot, together with the accompanying dialogue, is telling the audience how to read the rest of the film. The colour is an expression of characters' perspective and emotions, what they find important. The tension continues to build until we reach the emotional climax of the scene. Now the image changes dramatically, drawing attention to the moment. The negative silhouette is an almost exact copy of a frame from the graphic novel.
I tell her I love her. The silencer makes a whisper of the gunshot.
Now, a double meaning is created by the red dress. In addition to the possible romantic connections, it takes on another emotional connection, linking red to the colour of blood. This dual reading is indicative of the wider film as a whole, which presents ethically ambiguous characters and situations. To examine the effect that the isolation of colour has had on the audience's reception of Sin City, we shall return to the same scene, but now in just black and white. Ailish Wood, basing her definition on work done by Brian Masumi, coins a term that is integral to our position. Masumi identifies two modes of engagement possible with imagery. One is embedded in a meaning system, connecting with a specific emotion, and the other is a modification of an emotion that is not aligned with meaning. Masumi identifies two modes of engagement possible with imagery. One is embedded in a meaning system, connecting with a specific emotion, and the other is a modification of an emotion that is not aligned with meaning. The second mode of engagement can have either an enhancing or suppressing effect on the emotional response. The term Wood coins, AFX, or affective effects, refers to a digital manipulation that creates tension between two competing aesthetic strategies in a sequence of images. We can return now to our example. Watching Sin City in just black and white, the audience would still perceive an emotional response through the image, sound and editing, but the addition of selective coloration creates a tension between what is observed and another emotional response that is not yet allocated. In this way, the digital intermediate is able to produce AFX, specifically modifying an audience's emotional response throughout the viewing experience. Wood makes a distinction between the selective use of colour in Sin City and a similar use of a digital intermediate in the film Pleasantville. Director Gary Ross uses colour in black and white in Pleasantville to portray the dissemination of the liberal morals throughout the community, after Jennifer, Reese Witherspoon, ignores the pleas of her brother David, Tobey Maguire, for her to fit into the conservative world of his favourite television program.
I didn't think you'd want to come here until we'd been pinned for a little while.
You can pin me anytime you want to.
The distinction that Wood makes between Pleasantville and Sin City's use of selective coloration is that the presence of colour amongst the black and white mise-en-scène in Pleasantville is diegetic.
Wow, what happened to your gum?
The characters are able to see the colours appear as the morals of the Pleasantville community continue to develop. This is in direct contrast to Sin City, where colour is used only as an aesthetic device to further the emotional connection with the subject, completely separate from narrative. Therefore, Pleasantville's use of digital manipulation is not classified as AFX, because there is one overall aesthetic strategy, not two forming tension as in Sin City. The utilisation of colour correction through a digital intermediate to create AFX has not had wide adoption, but the technique has been translated to other genres. A Single Man is a 2009 film by director Tom Ford and is adapted from the novel of the same name. The film tells the story of a suicidal teacher as he goes through his day as per normal, even though it is the last he plans to spend alive. Throughout his day, George reminisces about his partner who died in a car crash in between his everyday social and work interactions. Director Tom Ford uses the abilities of the digital intermediate to alter the saturation of the image in order to portray the mood of the main protagonist, thus emphasizing the subjective nature of the story. A Single Man uses low saturation to represent George's suicidal mood. The image changes, however, during moments of happiness, increasing in vibrancy and saturation. Black and white is used as well during the film, but only during one scene. Not only is it a reflection of the black and white photo that prompts the memory, but it also carries a thematic significance. This memory is deeply personal, and so the director has chosen not to show the audience how George feels about it, instead presenting it without comment.
So explain your friend Charlotte for me.
What would you like to know?
I don't know. You seem very intimate, I guess. Like you were once together or something. You haven't slept with her, have you?
Yes.
The technology works alongside pre-existing film techniques to tell the intensely personal story. In this way, A Single Man has used the digital intermediate to enhance the ability of the film to portray a subjective experience. Wood notes in her article entitled Pixel Visions that, working under the more emphatic constraints of a visual intertext, a filmmaker seeking to achieve a particular look informed by the original comic may push against established cinematic convention by moving away from adaptive strategies based primarily on the condensation of a complex text into a screenplay and towards microtransformations by exploring the possibilities of a digital intermediate. Although adaptations such as Zack Snyder's Watchmen and 300 may reproduce individual panels from their respective source graphic novels, Edgar Wright's 2010 film Scott Pilgrim vs. the World takes the genre of comic book adaptations and uses it as carte blanche to play with film form as much as possible. Nameplates introduce characters while providing an opportunity for jokes.
You're dating a high school girl.
Hi.
Hey, Knives, this is Steven Stills. He's the talent.
Hey.
Sorry, what was your name?
Kim.
Can you play the drums?
Yes.
Onomatopoeia float in the air, interacting with the actors and the mise-en-scène. And actions and movements are emphasized with graphic flair.
I'm talking to her!
What?
These additional elements don't feel out of place in an adaptation from a comic book, but it might be hard to see how these effects could be used in other genres. There is one exception, however. Split-screen effects are not products of the digital age, but in Scott Pilgrim, the division of the screen is used not just as a way to condense scenes, but also to add style and flavour to the image. Instead of being interested solely in what is presented inside the frame, Wright is interested in the frame itself. Emphasis is added in certain scenes by playing on the associations filmgoers have between aspect ratios and film style. By changing the frame to a letterbox, it takes on the even more filmic and dramatic look of widescreen formats such as CinemaScope or Panavision. This same technique has been used by Ang Lee in his film Life of Pi, and he too has subverted the conventions of the frame. As the fish jump in and out of the screen, they provide a 3D effect that surprises and engages, provoking renewed interest in the scene. Increased engagement means increased emotional investment, which is the aim of the narrative film. As we have shown, the recently popular genre of comic book adaptations has allowed filmmakers to experiment with new technologies, thus expanding the possibilities of film storytelling. Through their use of a digital intermediate to selectively colour the image and enable novel uses of the frame, they have expanded the range of expressive potential for film visuals and provided more avenues for the transmission of information.
Wow.
We know, we didn't address the seemingly endless tide of films from the studios in charge of the Marvel and DC franchises, but I hope you don't mind. Although their decision to retain a particular colour aesthetic across a wide number of films is interesting, they are not pushing boundaries in the same way as the films that we have discussed. In other words, not all comic book adaptations are created equal, or at least, not all comic book adaptations are equally creative.